So we're going to start out with a bit of a economic panic during Roosevelt's time. It's not really a huge depression or panic that we have to worry about, nothing like we saw in the 1890s. But in 1907, we do have a bit of a panic. The Aldrich-Vreeland Act is going to be passed, which says that national banks can lend money or issue money backed by various sorts of collateral. Well, that gets kind of dangerous. Is it silver? Is it gold? Is it somebody's shoes? What's the collateral? So this was too ambiguous for the nation to handle, and we see a panic as a result. In 1908, Teddy Roosevelt's going to leave office. He had declared in 1904 when he was elected that he would only stay for the remainder of that term, and then that was it. So he holds true to that promise. However, he handpicks his successor. He basically tells the Republican Party, this is the guy that should replace me because this is the guy that's most in line with what I do. So Taft, William Howard Taft is nominated for the presidency from the Republican Party in 1908. Taft, you might know, is our heaviest president. He topped the scales at over 300 pounds. And there is this story of him getting stuck in a bathtub and having to be removed with butter. That's an urban myth, we think. We have no corroboration on that whatsoever. Taft certainly isn't around to tell us. Taft would be the only president to go on to become, at this point, a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He does that in the 20s. And his sons also go into politics in mass form. His sons, his grandsons. Most recently, one of his grandsons was the governor of Ohio up until about 2007. And then you have the Democrats, William Jennings Bryan, running for office. He, of course, Cross of Gold, he's the Democrat. And the Socialists are going to run Eugene V. Debs from prison. So that was kind of an interesting election. We'd never had a prisoner really run for office before, so this was certainly a monumental step. Teddy Roosevelt, he heads to Africa for a safari. He's going to spend about a year and a half there. Doesn't really want to be bothered by events in the United States. So Taft is going to have a deal, and it's going to be dollar diplomacy. Now, with dollar diplomacy, he wanted to take money that was made on Wall Street, so corporate money, and he wanted to invest that money abroad because it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to maintain stability, especially in those Latin American countries that were having problems with debt, and it was going to keep American influence in those countries. See, there's the ulterior motive. So that was really important to him. So dollar diplomacy is his foreign policy. And then we also see Taft as a trust buster. Now, he's more of a trust buster than Teddy Roosevelt was, although Teddy Roosevelt's the one that seems to get all the credit. In 4 years, Taft is going to break up 90 trusts in the United States. He really goes after them. In 1911, that's the biggest one that breaks up during his tenure in office, and that's Standard Oil. The Supreme Court says that Standard Oil must break up, and they use what is known as the rule of reason. Any trust that unreasonably curtails trade must be broken up. And they deemed that Standard Oil unreasonably constrained trade, and therefore it had to go. Now, probably the worst bill that was passed during Taft's administration, the one that really angers all the progressives, is the Payne-Aldrich bill. This was an antitrust bill, but by the time it got through Congress, they had added so many riders to the bill. Now, a rider is an addendum to the bill. So you have the bulk of the bill, and then senators get to add individual riders to it, stuff that they politically want to get through, but they can't get it through on its own, so they add it to a bill that's almost guaranteed to pass. We have a lot of problems with those today. This was an antitrust bill. It was softened by the riders. The riders really took the teeth out of this bill. It meant nothing by the time it was passed. So the progressives get really angry with Taft. Man, they're madder than heck. And Taft makes the situation worse because he comes out and says, this was the best piece of legislation we've ever passed. What? Are you kidding? And the progressives really hit the roof on that one. Then we see a bit of a scandal break out with Taft's administration, the Ballinger-Pinchot quarrel. Now, Ballinger was the Secretary of the Interior. His job is to protect our natural resources. His job is not to hang curtains in the White House. Secretary of Interior protects natural resources. Pinchot was the chief of agriculture in the Department of Forestry. That was his job. What happens is Ballinger makes some questionable land deals with corporations in Wyoming, Montana, and Alabama. He basically sells out federal land to these corporations, which really angers the progressives. Man, they're hotter than heck over this. They're really angry because our job is to protect natural resources, not sell them out to corporate interests. So Pinchot criticizes Ballinger. Well, here's your little lesson in hierarchy. You don't criticize your superiors. Pinchot criticizes Ballinger, which is overstepping his authority. He's not allowed to criticize him. He's his superior, commanding officer, essentially. And Taft is going to fire Pinchot. He's going to dismiss him. Now, what really makes the progressives angry is this guy was actually looking out for natural resources. And you fired him? Really? So the progressives get really, really angry. By the spring of 1910, the Republicans are completely split. They cannot make rhyme or reason over unity in this party at all. So Roosevelt, he hears about all of this, and he returns from Africa, and he's really upset with the way the Republican Party has gone. He's really angry with Taft. He did not do what Roosevelt intended him to do. So Roosevelt goes to Osawatomie, Kansas, and he delivers a speech. And in that speech, he calls for a new platform for progressives called New Nationalism. And what he says is that we need to increase the power to remedy social and economic abuses. The federal government needs to have more teeth. They need to have more authority to fix the economic and social woes of this country through regulation, basically. The Republicans really see how bad their party is. In 1910, it's an even-numbered year, which means we have congressional elections. The whole Senate and 1/3 of the House of Representatives all up for, the entire House of Representatives and 1/3 of the Senate. I reversed that. So all of the members of the House, 1/3 of the Senate, all up for election here in 1910. And the Republicans are going to lose these elections badly, okay? Now, we also see in this election the first socialist to get elected to national office, and it's going to be a U.S. congressman, Victor Berger. He's a socialist, and he represents the area of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So that's kind of a significant happening there. Now, Taft versus Roosevelt. You know, they're arguing. They're not happy with one another. Taft isn't happy that Roosevelt's stepping on his toes. Roosevelt's not happy with where Taft had gone. So in 1911, the National Progressive Republican League, they get together. These are progressive Republicans, okay, on the fringe of the party, who get kind of like our Tea Party today, except that these were progressives. They get together and they want to nominate. They want to make sure their party is secure, so they want to find the best nominee. And it looks at the time like La Follette from Wisconsin, the governor. It looked like he might be the best progressive candidate at the time. However, Teddy Roosevelt steps up in February of 1912, and he declares that he's going to run for a 3rd term in office, presidency. So he is pushed to the Chicago Republican National Convention in Chicago in 1912, and it's going to be Teddy Roosevelt versus Taft going after the Republican nomination. Taft wins. So what does Teddy Roosevelt do? Teddy Roosevelt says, all right, you don't want me? I'll find people that do. And he forms a 3rd party. And we'll talk about that election of 1912 next.